right, welcome to the Untold Civil War, and today we're finally doing our Civil War whiskey tasting, which has been so popular. And I'm really excited to do this because I'm with my friend Tony, who is a manager of a local craft spirit and wine store, which I like to frequent, of course. And so he's going to be tasting these whiskeys with me. What do we have on the table, Tony?
So we have a traditional Kentucky rye over here, although Kentucky makes a lot of bourbon as well. Then we have a New York, upstate New York, New Paltz, Coppersea Springtown whiskey. Then finally, to round it off, we have Kings County. We have their rye, the Empire rye. We have their unaged rye, and then lastly we have a corn whiskey that's also unaged. And then we have on display our Fighting 69th, which unfortunately didn't make it from last time.
Right.
But
yes.
that is it's a tragedy, but we'll have to move on for that.
Right. I mean, Fighting 69th was my alma mater. I always talk about the Fighting 69th, and this is a really cool display piece. It's their toasting box, which of course you can get through their website that we have on display. But no Fighting 69th today.
We're American today.
We're going with American whiskeys today, and as you mentioned. We got Old Overholt here. Mm-hmm. I believe that brand name goes back to the Civil War, mm-hmm. right? Civil War era. And the others are sort of new on the block.
Yep. We have some New York micro distillers.
Okay.
So these guys are pretty new to the scene relatively, but New York is mainly known for their rye. And both of these are members of the Empire Rye movement. So if you ever see on a bottle, you probably can't see on the camera, but there's a little stamp on the side of every bottle, and that will indicate if it's an Empire rye, meaning that it has 75% of its rye sourced in New York, although most people will do pretty much 100, and it's been aged at least 2 years to have that certification there.
And also on display we've got this tin cup from the badge maker. Mm-hmm. It's a Civil War tin cup, hand-painted, Untold Civil War podcast. I actually posted this on our Patreon, and I already got people asking me about purchasing their own. So I talked to him, and we're gonna start offering this as merchandise on the new website that we finally launched for the podcast, which is great.
I have to ask, does whiskey taste better out of that?
I think so. I think definitely. If you buy an Untold Civil War podcast hand-painted tin cup, I guarantee you.
Oh, wow.
I guarantee. The whiskey should taste better. No. But no, definitely, this is something that we're hoping to get into this onto the website pretty soon. He's going to do a bunch of hand-painted ones. He's also designing a bunch of stickers for us. So if you want to wrap Untold Civil War on your laptop or your refrigerator or your car, we're going to have stickers coming out as well.
The list of perks are growing.
So there's a lot of cool things going on now. This is a great year for us. And of course, I want to just give a shout out to the badge maker because he is a sponsor of the show. So thanks to him, all of this is possible. Another thing I'd like to mention is that we have a new sponsor as well, which is Military Images Magazine. And that's why we have two images here, as you can see. First off, let's just get that one there. First off is this guy. He's a Union soldier. It appears from New Jersey with a back mark from New Jersey. It's an original CDV. And what's really interesting about this is, as I promised to my Patreon supporters, he's going to be raffled off. And today we're going to do that raffle.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
we'll put an image of it closer on the
camera.
Yeah, right.
We'll definitely. Exactly, I'll have an image and I'll post it up so you can see exactly what it is and a little close up of him. And basically, we'll be drawing names for this.
They're all my name, actually.
So right, Tony, you are in the running for this.
How many cuts do you think it's going to take to get me to pull my own name out of the hat?
Right, there
or
you
did you write my name every time? I forgot how we're supposed to rig this one.
Yeah, right. So then, of course, if you don't win, and here you go, Tony. If you don't win this raffle, I do have another Civil War image that's going to go up on the website. This one's really cool. We won't be talking too much about him today, but he is a Civil War engineer. But we're definitely going to have this CDV up on the website as well for sale. It's a new, we believe he might even be a New York engineer because there were volunteer outfits made up of engineers, which not many people know. So keep an eye on that and wait for more information to come. Very nice image that will be going up for sale. All right, so now that that's out of the way, you want to try some of these whiskeys?
Sure. Oh, wait, do you want to do the raffle first?
We'll do it at the end.
Okay.
That's what. Now you're forced to sit through this lovely video to find out who won the raffle. So we're gonna start with Old Overholt here.
So Kentucky rye. As all ryes, we're gonna have a strong peppery note on here, but I'm not terribly familiar with these guys. I know they date back to 1810, right? That's where the origin story is.
I think so.
Mhm.
Yeah. What's it say on the bottle?
That's
here?
what it says, 1810.
Okay. Yeah. There you go. 1810 established. Yeah.
I know they're part of Beam Suntory now, which is like, its maker. Jim Beam is the biggest manufacturer of American whiskey, and they're part of that group. They do all the Japanese stuff, all the major Japanese stuff, the Suntory stuff. But yeah, this is no longer a micro distiller. You know, these guys are full-fledged, full production run stuff now.
Okay.
But yeah, let's do it. Salud.
Salute.
Pretty classic rye.
I would say so.
It's got a little fire on the back end.
Oh yeah.
It's a little sweet, but yeah. You know, the mid palate, it's there, but it's not very complex. It's got good pepper. It's got decent oomph to it, but it's just sort of your standard rye.
And so, you know, come as an upgrade from my last whiskey tasting. As you can see, I'm a bit of a heathen, and although I love my whiskeys, I might not have that palate to really, you know, find those notes in there, and that's why I got the expert from our local store here. So he's going to be providing us with this information.
Yeah.
What I can tell you is that definitely when I drink that, it reminds me of what I think of when I think of just drinking a rye that you would buy.
Yeah, it's just your standard bread and butter
kind of
stuff.
bread and butter stuff. Yeah.
Um,
Not bad, not bad. I'm just saying that's what you
I
would
know.
expect, right?
I wish I knew that we were doing all ryes. I would have brought. So Coppersea makes a Bonnie Crag. They do a floor malted rye, which means that they take the grain, the rye grains, that they germinate them on the floor. And it's a very labor-intensive process. They sort of take it out, they blanket it on their barn floor, and they have the seeds germinate. And then they sort of rotate the seeds over as they're germinating,
Right.
and then put it in the hopper once it's dried out. And it makes a very malty rye. It's actually the only distillery, to my knowledge, that still does that. They'll do a green malted rye too, which is the same thing, except they, instead of having it dry out and then they churn it, they do it live. So it's very wet. It's pretty cool. It's very tedious, labor intensive to do. You know, these guys are very small batch producers, Kings County and the Springtown or the Coppersea. So everything is done by hand. In fact, you know, if you look them up, they're pretty much out of a barn in New Paltz over there. But yeah, I mean, it's a totally different world. These guys are small production, small run. You know, everything is done by hand.
But when you were talking about this, so this one, like you said, is not an actual rye. So this is something a little bit different.
Yeah. The story behind this, in fact, our sales rep James over here sold a ton of their bourbon. In fact, all of their bourbon to an online whiskey club that I think they're in California. But he sold 500 cases. And they were happy for the business, but 500 cases is all they had for the entire year. So they actually had to open up every single cask of their bourbon, and for the last 2 years, you haven't been able to find Excelsior bourbon because he sold it all. In fact, they had him go up there and barrel everything and help ship it out. They made him work the entire summer after he sold everything to fulfill the order. But yeah, so this product actually came from that. They didn't have enough bourbon alone to sell, so they kind of mixed a little bit of everything. And what you have here is a Springtown. It's sort of just an experiment from them, and it's a little bit of everything they got going on.
Oh, so it's like a mix, a blend.
Yeah, it is a blend.
It's a blend.
It's a blend.
Okay.
There is no mash bill for it because it's, you know, they didn't plan for this. It's sort of, that's what happens when you're at a small scale production.
So my question is, because this is a blend, do you want to try this?
We'll do this last.
First, or do it last so that we try?
I mean, realistically, we probably should have started with this because rye is always going to be a dominant sort of thing. But it's fine. We'll take a second. We'll talk a little bit, and then we'll finish off to there. So we're gonna try. Let's do the New York Empire Rye Rye.
Well, this is the Kings County Distillery.
This is Kings County. Yep.
They're out of the Brooklyn Navy Yard.
Right here in our backyard.
Right here in our backyard. What's really cool is that I sat down with the guys behind who are behind the scenes on this, and they were fantastic.
Yeah,
I
they're
mean,
super nice.
when I invited them on the show, they were really enthusiastic about it because they're big history buffs as well.
Of course.
They're really big into really New York City history of New York City's whiskey distilling history, which is interesting.
You'll find that with a lot of guys. I mean, the people who open these sort of micro distilleries over here are very passionate. You know, everything is done by hand. You know, it really is a labor of love, and I think you have to be a little crazy to do it. Because, there's a lot of manual effort that goes in there.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You're sort of putting a lot of time and money into barrels and just having them sit there for years and hoping that, like, what you did 2 years ago is enough to carry you now.
And of course, what's really cool is that they actually came on the show. They talked about it. They talked about the brand. When I invited them, he actually sent me a whole box of all of the stuff that that they've made so that you could taste the whole range, which I didn't even ask for. And I thought that was really nice of them. You know, really great guys.
No, they're super nice. I mean, they don't have a distributor. They deliver everything themselves.
So they've actually delivered directly to your store, right? So one of the things they mentioned, of course, is that the unaged stuff, you know, they kind of released that as a way to give something out, have some sort of product.
Yeah.
While they were waiting for.
That's what I said. Like, you
to
have
age,
to be a little
you know.
crazy because you know you're putting a lot of time and money into something, and it just sits there for years. You know, it's hard to make something a day or a week in advance. Imagine, you know, several years out.
Right. And so, like we were saying, you know, this was sort of some things that they released unaged, so they could just put something out there. And now they have the aged rye and a bunch of other stuff.
You only get this one time of the year. Once they sell out, they sell out. And I know firsthand, you know, that's all we get pretty much is the batch. So.
And they're great. So I can't wait to taste this.
Yeah, let's pour it.
And of course, I'm going to leave a link in the description to go to the audio podcast episode so you can actually hear the entire interview. And what's interesting, a little fun, I guess you could say fact or fun little story about them is that during the pandemic, you know, when the height of the pandemic, New York City was hit pretty bad, to put it mildly, I should say. And they were actually started putting out hand sanitizer. Yeah. And so that was really cool or really funny, I should say, because, you know, people were walking around with hand sanitizer and they're like, wait a minute, this hand sanitizer smells like vodka. Yeah, it smells like vodka. It smells like whiskey. And it was funny because they came back with, well, what did you think it was going to smell like? This is what we do.
That's essentially all it is. I mean, they put like deterrents in there so it tastes really bitter so people don't drink hand sanitizer. But I mean, essentially, it's just alcohol with like, you know, they'll mix in like aloe vera so it doesn't dry out your hands so much. Right. But yeah, I mean,
but essentially, that's
it's
what
cool
it is,
that they, you know, shifting gears to a local need.
Another interesting fact about Empire Rye is the tops of the bottles, or the bottles themselves. I find the bottles are very unique.
Yeah, they do the traditional flasks.
The traditional flask
That's
bottles.
always what gets people like look at them and think, what are those?
What are those exactly? And they look great.
They do a bunch of stuff too. They do like a peated bourbon. They do a single malt peated.
Oh yeah.
They have their regular bourbon. But like anything New York, their flagship is always rye. You know, New York and the rye, they go hand in hand.
And I always said this looks like something that you would see like back in the day.
Of course.
On the top of like the pharmacy shelf.
Listen,
like,
you put it right in your coat
jacket.
jacket. You know?
And actually, he was saying that the tops. The only real distinctive part of this, besides the small labeling,
Yeah, they have black tops for
top,
different.
right.
Yeah, so the gold is the rye, and then they have like a black top for the peated bourbon. I think the regular bourbon is silver.
Okay, and then he also said, as far as drinking this, he says, look, he doesn't hold it against anybody. He says you can drink it in a cocktail if you want. He's actually seen people use his rye, his whiskeys, to make brownies and stuff.
Really?
And he said it was so surprising because, you know, it's pretty high end. It's not really cooking whiskeys. But there you have it. He said, you know what? At least they're enjoying it.
Listen, if you're making brownies out of it, talk to me. I'll switch out the bottle. I'll drink that. Yeah. I can give you something else, and you can put that in your brownies.
Exactly. But you know, he recommends that, or how he likes to have it is either neat in the winter or on the rocks in the summer. And so we are in the winter season, although it's been a warm winter, relatively speaking. So we're drinking it.
Give it a good whiff. It's very floral. It's almost sweet when you smell it.
I would say there's a lot more going on in here than in here.
Yeah, it's a lot more.
It's a lot more.
It's a lot more cereally. It's more malty. You know. Yeah, really, it's got a lot more going on. And it follows through in the palate. You know, it doesn't just have that single note of spicy rye. It starts off, it's a little sweet. It's got that floralness to it to really introduce you to it. Then when you get to the mid palate, you know, that pepper starts coming out, but really once you like finish it and it's just sticking to your tongue, it's sticking to the roof of your mouth, you get that classic rye spice coming out.
Christmas spice.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
I find that in a lot of New York rye, it tends to have that more malty notes to start off with it. But yeah, there's a lot of labor of love in here.
Yeah, they do a good job. They do a great job.
Enjoyable stuff. Let's cut the cameras.
Yeah, we'll just sit here and just sip away. You know, wish you guys could join us, that sort of thing.
That's the next tier Patreon support.
You know what? If we get enough support for these episodes, that should be the next Patreon. Like, join Patreon, you'll be invited, cordially invited, to our next whiskey tasting.
Come drinking with Paul.
And it's true because here we have a Patreon supporter right here, so he knows you do get invited if you're a Patreon supporter. All right, so next we're gonna try this next bad boy, which is not a rye, unlike the other ones we tried.
In fact, you won't even be able to find this in the stores. So like we were talking before about the unaged stuff, this is sort of a holdover product. You know, there was kind of an experiment. It's good stuff, but they're known for their rye. That's their flagship. They do bourbons, but soon enough you'll be able to find their bourbon back on the shelves if God's their witness over here. But let's see. Let's try it out.
Always a great sound coming out.
The glugs, yeah.
So now you told us the story about this.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is this actually going to become a thing, or is this like a limited edition type thing?
This was sort of a limited edition. Yeah.
Oh wow, okay.
Because they do their normal stuff is they'll do an Empire Rye, which is not floor malted. It's their introductory line rye over there, and they'll do the Excelsior Bourbon. Then they also have bottled and bonded. You can find the same thing with Kings County. A lot of New York producers will do bottled and bonded, which is a term from Prohibition, where they have to be a certified bonded producer, and the casks have to be, I forget exactly the metrics, but there's like a specific size to the cask, and it has to have a certain proofage to it. And then there'll be a certified bonded cask, and it's sort of the higher echelon of their stuff. It's usually a little bit pricier, and it's a little bit higher proof usually. But yeah, this is they do a wide variety of stuff. But you know, you'll find a lot of producers, especially these micro distillers. They're not afraid to tinker. They're not afraid to experiment with stuff. Like I know Kings County, they do a lot of spice stuff. They'll do like a Christmas spiced whiskey. They have even just the unaged stuff. But you'll find there's a lot more variety to it, and you can actually like talk to the people who carry it usually, because you know it's a labor of love.
One thing I wanted to mention is that when I was talking to the people behind Kings County Distillery, they talked about the difference between small craft distillers versus the larger macro distillers.
The big dogs.
The big dogs, because what's interesting, and I don't know, I can't tell you about the recipes they used in the Civil War when distilling, and I don't have that information about how things were distilled back then, but I can tell you this much, is that, as they were explained to me, is that even though they haven't been around as long as some of these bigger distillers have been, they are using tools and methods that a lot of small town distillers from back in the Civil War days probably were using.
I mean, that's the thing. You know, you'll have guys that do labor by hand still. So in a lot of respects, with anything consumable, you never really know how it was back in the day.
Right.
I mean, especially if you go into like historical recipes and things like that, there wasn't, they didn't talk about their 53%, grain that they're using, only, 35% malted corn, or that's not a thing, but they're not going to tell you there's 15% barley in there, right?
Right, exactly.
No one ever really recorded that. It's sort of a modern concept to have everything quantified and sort of logged.
Exactly. But you could argue that because they're doing it by hand and they're so labor intensive and they're using techniques that were used by distillers back in the day, they might actually be a little bit closer to what the whiskeys were at least made like, or maybe perhaps tasted like compared to other ones, even though the brand names go all the way back.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know.
We weren't there to
try those whiskeys, but I think
we haven't invented time travel.
Exactly. We haven't. Yeah. But I think that was a good point that they did bring up in the interview. Again, the full access to that interview will be in the description for everyone to try.
It's funny. A lot of big producers don't even distill their products anymore. They'll just buy product from a major producer, and they'll either barrel it or just bottle it. And they're I think they're called NDPs now.
Okay.
So non-distiller producers. But you'll find that in a lot of the industry, it's besides that, one company owns 12 different ryes. Are they really gonna have 12 completely different products? Not really. They'll outsource it to someone. They'll say, give us this mash bill, and they'll produce 500 to 1,000 cases or whatever it is. They'll bottle it, slap the name on it, and done deal. They don't have to do anything. It's a lot less cost intensive, and for them, they don't have to manage all the warehouse and distribute. It's that's how it goes for a lot of guys, and I've seen it firsthand. It's a lot of time, effort, and money to produce stuff on a small scale. And actually, a little story. So the brand Coppersea gets their name from an old, I think it was New York Times article, in which the reporter went upstate to New York, and he said that when you go up there, it's basically a sea of copper because of all the copper-based copper stills that they use to produce it. So that's actually a very historical name. Yeah, it's you'll find for these little guys, they take the time and effort to do the traditional, harder methods that are truer, to the product.
Yeah. And so there you go. And definitely, I'd say probably you would know better talking to these actual distillers. They probably have the same attitudes that some of these.
Yeah, they're all a little crazy.
These prohibition era guys.
You have to be a little nuts.
Right.
I think you do.
Well, let's try this blend here.
Mm-hmm.
So I
poured you a little bit.
Thank you.
All right, but I'm gonna pour myself a little bit.
And like you said, this is not a traditional rye. This is mash.
Yeah, it's a blend. So I don't have the exact mash because like we said, they have a little bit of everything going on in here, but we're certainly going to have a lot more corn in here than the others. So you'll smell a little bit more sweetness on there. It's not going to be as flowery, but it'll still have notes on that. I mean,
and a note to all my listeners and viewers of the new YouTube channel. I tell you this: get a friend that works in a local wine store / craft liquor store, because these are the gifts I get, the great things I get to take part of. So
perks of the job, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
So you have that corn. It's a lot sweeter. It's a little bit smoother. You don't have nearly as much of that pepperiness going on.
It's not as spicy as the other ones.
No, definitely not.
I think it's definitely a lot sweeter than the other ones, for sure.
I mean, that's the corn. Anytime you have anything with corn, that's why bourbon is sweet. It's got to be 52% corn. Mm-hmm. So bourbon is always an easier drinker. If you're not very experienced with whiskeys, well, maybe not. That's not our target audience, but certainly if you're trying to introduce someone, I would highly suggest giving them an easy bourbon. Try to look up the mash bill. See if it's mostly corn. You can put a little barley in there too. That's usually pretty easy drinking. It'll add a little bit of maltiness to it. But yeah, I'd say if you're new to whiskeys, probably you want to avoid a little bit of rye and sort of once you wet your chest a little bit, wet your whistle a little bit, then you start branching out and try some higher proof stuff or bottle bonded stuff.
Well, wonderful. I mean, I think we had a nice selection here of some craft stuff that probably a lot of our listeners probably haven't heard of. So
a lot of Yankee stuff going
Right,
on.
a lot of Yankee stuff, yeah. Which was interesting because we have the two different moonshines, and we talked about how rye was definitely a more northern thing, and the corn moonshine was more down south. So there you go.
Definitely you have a more bourbon.
Right.
Kentucky bourbon.
So for our reenactors, if you have a certain impression, right, if you're doing a Union side or a Confederate side, maybe keep that in mind of what you might be carrying in your flask next time. Finally, I think we've got to do this raffle, this Patreon raffle, as promised. guys, if you did not sign up on Patreon, you're missing out here. You're getting a real relic of the Civil War here. But those of you who did sign up on Patreon, I want to thank you guys so much. Tony, you're one of them. Thank you so much.
That's why my name is going to be drawn right now.
Yeah.
It's impressive, actually. We can determine the future.
There you go. There you go. All of you guys, you know, donating to the show, taking part, really helps build the community and really puts funds into this project so that we can
I think
really
you're kind of just spending all your money on booze over here.
luckily, actually, I have to say,
you're spending my money on booze.
A couple of these are gifts
no.
from Tony, so we have to give a shout out to Tony. But Tony, you're going to be the one to draw, as you can see.
Right.
We have it in our Fighting 69th hat, my alma mater, of course.
I won't
always
even look
represented.
at it. I'm just going to look off to the side.
Just look aside, look away, right?
I'm going to have you read it, all right?
There you go.
My hand? All
Grab one.
Okay, it's my name, right?
Let's see.
Hold up.
I'll grab it for you.
I'll hand it to you. That's the hat. Is it
Actually, it is Tony.
Okay, hold on. I
It actually is Tony. That's funny.
I don't know. I feel like I can't.
Okay.
You know?
All right. Well, look at you. You're a champ.
We're gonna mix it up, stir it like a good pot of pasta over here. All right.
There you go.
And now I'll draw. And if I draw again, then what can I say? You know.
Yeah, that's it. That was.
Read it out, buddy.
Okay, it was Joseph Balicenti, the badge maker. Look at that.
Look at that. That's a kickback.
All right, so thank you, Joe, for being a Patreon subscriber. I will definitely message you, call you, and we'll figure out something in the future. So there you go.
Great guy, you know?
Yeah, great guy. Really easy to get in contact with. So that's awesome.
And again, thank you for
and that being said, again, this is going to be up on the website very soon. Our cups, or whiskey tasting cups, so definitely check that out. Stickers coming shortly. And last but not least, we have been able to raise enough money to actually take the show on the road. So I'll be working closely with our sponsor, Civil War Trails, the greatest outdoor museum in the U.S. And we'll be hitting the trail and checking out some Untold Civil War sites, so that's really exciting. And as I mentioned before, Military Images is our newest sponsor. It's a great resource to have. Those magazines are invaluable to a Civil War collector, Civil War historian, Civil War buff. So definitely check out the links in the description to get access to all of our sponsors. And thank you again to our Patreon subscribers and patrons, I should say. And thank you for everyone who watched this video, gave it a thumbs up, subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Like and subscribe, people.
And definitely go check out the audio podcast side of things as well, because they're unique content on both platforms.
Yeah.
So thank you, Tony, again for coming on the show, man.
Well,
really appreciate
anytime.
it.
My pleasure, buddy.
All right.